Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 68 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games, the podcast where we shine a light on the storytellers, the creatives, and the voices behind the camera. In a strange turn of events, we actually have no guest this week. So, as a result, I figured I would take this time to just reflect on the week, pull the curtain back on my own realities as a podcaster, and have a little peek into the future of what's to come on Behind the Camera. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to stay connected, all of my links are in the About section from socials, merch, website, and much more. Hitting follow, sharing the show, or leaving a quick rating really helps Behind the Camera grow. So in what can only be described as the perfect storm, unfortunately I have no guest this week. But you know, that happens. It's been a little bit of a crazy week. I had 5 recordings scheduled for this week, and only one of them actually happened. And that was Wheatus, which released on Wednesday, the 5th of November. So, if you're kind of missing your Behind the Camera fix, definitely go and check that out. I, wouldn't blame you. I very happy with that episode. I thought it was very good. A lot of people have said so themselves. So, just going off what the people are saying. But yeah, so we have no guest this week. So this is me doing my very, very first solo episode in any podcast ever. And let me tell you, this is weird. This is just not something that I'm used to. I'm so used to having a guest. Like, hosting a podcast by yourself is fine, but there's always somebody there on the other side. There's always a guest. And I've hosted a podcast as well with a co-host. That was great. I am just used to the more conversational style of things. So me doing a solo episode is a little bit weird, but let's just see how it goes. I didn't really like the idea of having it be 11 days between episodes. I think this entire year I've not missed a single week. I know last year I did, but that was an entirely different format last year. This is a little bit more polished and consistent, and I want to kind of keep that. So here we are. So what has led us to this moment? So the episode with Wheatus came out on Wednesday the 5th, and I think that's kind of where things just shifted this week. I found out that my wife had to go to hospital on Wednesday, and at that point I was just like, right, drop everything. I just had to drop everything. I just couldn't have been anywhere else. So dropped everything. I had to cancel 2 recordings, or reschedule, I should say. I had to reschedule 2 recordings that night just because I needed to be with my wife, and that's okay. Of course, I couldn't have imagined being anywhere else in that moment. Even if she'd come home fine, like before I finished work, I still couldn't have, in good conscience, recorded those episodes. And again, that's fine. We got them rescheduled. They're going to happen in the very near future, and that's fine. We're all good. And on Saturday the 8th, which is actually when I'm recording this, I was also meant to have 2 episodes recorded, but for different reasons, the guests had to reschedule. And again, just unfortunate circumstance. Just unfortunate circumstance has kind of led us to this. But that is the nature of podcasting. Sometimes things just shift around, part of the process. But the good news is these conversations are still happening, just a little bit later than planned. It'll come out in the next few weeks. But to go back to that, you guys are stuck with me for 1 week. But I think it's probably good to sort of like take a little bit of time just to maybe pull back the curtain on, as a podcaster, what it is that I do. Because every Sunday, and sometimes the odd Wednesday when I release a special episode, everybody just sees the finished product, but not a lot of people really kind of see what goes into it. So consider this episode like a behind the camera, almost, if you will. Now, when I used to do this live for like the first 20 some episodes, I guess like you could say to a degree, people kind of saw more what went into it then. But like as I say now, it's a completely different format. The scheduling is done so differently, you know, and the rescheduling is like it's like a jigsaw. It's just so hard to kind of find the right sort of time for everybody involved, especially when you take things like time zones into consideration. I interview a lot of people from overseas, and when you look at like someone in the UK interviewing somebody in America, you're talking like anywhere from 5 to 8 hours time difference. Five is usually more than manageable. But when you get to that sort of Pacific time, that's when it kind of becomes a little bit of an issue, because whenever I'm interviewing somebody from the States, I kind of have to like rely on them being available earlier in the day. And that's sometimes just not feasible. But I think like the good thing about like what I do is I will send any potential guests my calendar and they can kind of pick. So it's one of those things that if the times don't suit them, then they don't suit them. But like if somebody reaches out to me and they want to be on the podcast, then people kind of just make time. And that's the same for if I reach out to somebody and want to be on their podcast, I will make the time, because as much as a podcast host, you are on your guest's time, you're on their time, but they are also kind of on your time at the same time. There is that like little bit of give and take, but it's yeah, like you just kind of have to make it work. There has to like with that kind of comes like a lot of compromise. And with that you kind of get like a lot of rescheduling depending on what people do. Like I've had people who are authors, filmmakers, musicians, and I've had to reschedule for things where musicians have maybe had last minute gigs, filmmakers have had like last minute jobs come up, things like that. It's very dependent on what they do. And like the thing is, you kind of love to see these people busy. You kind of love to see these people who are really kind of working at their dream. And it like almost adds to the story as well, which I think is kind of important, because obviously the heart and soul of Behind the Camera is storytelling, the power of storytelling, and what that can really do. Like I've always said, if somebody was to ever take anything out of this podcast, it would just be that they've heard a good story, they can relate to it in some way, and hopefully maybe be inspired by it. There's so many different things, that and just hearing a good story is just kind of fascinating. Like take the episode with Wheatus, for example. There's so many things that I learned about the band, about the process of the first album, and about Teenage Dirtbag that I just never ever would have known, and that's kind of what I want to do for you guys today. There's as I mentioned before, you guys see the finished product, but what goes into it, how much editing I do, and I suppose even just the scheduling. Like, I mean, now I will be open and transparent with this. I'm not like, I don't do this full time. This is not my full time job, as much as I would love it to be. If this was my full time job, I would probably be recording 6 or 7 episodes a day. That would probably be the reality of it. But because I do this part time, I still release an episode every single week. I kind of have this sort of almost guilt of having there be too big of a gap between the record and the release of a certain episode. Now, again, this very much comes down to expectation versus reality in a way, because I've spoke to some people before who actually are full-time podcasters, and they've said, like, I've said to them like, oh, okay, we're recording here, but this episode will be released in 3 weeks time. And they're like, oh, 3 weeks? Are you serious? That's incredible. Because they have like months and months of backlog, and that's just the way they go. They're kind of like, right, well, they have a guest on, they'll just be like, well, not it'll be out when it's out, but it will be out in a few months, because of I do this full time. I have to kind of have all these episodes, and most podcasts really still do one a week. Well, that being said, some do one every day, very much dependent. But yeah, like The one a week is probably the most common out of most podcasts that you will see. So that's why I try and keep my recording schedule as light and condensed as possible. So I like there to be a backlog of at least 4 or 5 episodes. I like to have that many ready to go. Just sometimes you find that that's not really going to happen. But again, it's been one of those kind of really weird weeks where everything that could have happened did happen. And you just kind of have to make do. You kind of have to come up with a backup in the meantime and see how that goes. It's, and especially because I don't do this full time, there needs to be a sort of compromise of balance. That's another important thing, because I do sometimes find myself, because I only have X amount of time to sort of focus on this at any given time through the week, I almost find myself being a little bit consumed by it. I don't think it's too much, because I haven't really felt that sort of creative burnout just yet, but I think that's kind of what helps. That is the fact that I do have that kind of gap between recordings, and like I could like have 5 recordings in a week. That's 5 weeks worth of episodes. I can have them all edited and uploaded in a night, and then I don't really need to do anything other than look at clips, and that's not too bad. Like it sounds easy, and it generally is easy. If you're disciplined enough, you can really do it, no problem at all. And then a lot of it outside of that's networking, but the problem with that is you find yourself on your phone, on your computer, on social media far, far too much. Whether it be you're checking for analytics of a clip, you're checking your analytics of the podcast, you're checking to see if somebody's replied to an email or a tweet or whatever it may be. It does get a little bit consuming. So as much as it's a great talking point for people, there does need to be that kind of balance between this part of your life and your actual real life. Like, to give you an example, like 2 weeks ago, I met up with a couple of friends of mine who I hadn't seen for over a year. I hadn't actually seen since my wedding day. And that was over a year ago. And it was like, now the good thing is about me and my friend groups is we can go all this time without seeing each other. And it's like we've never spent time apart. So that's good. But it did kind of like hit us all at one point where it was like, my God, like that's a ridiculous amount of time. And like I even admitted, I think that's like the longest amount of time I've kind of gone without seeing any of them, probably for as long as we've been friends. And, I was like the first to admit, I was just like, look, like, I don't know where all this time's gone. All I know is that like I haven't had the best experience in my job at this point, and when I come home, I'm throwing myself into doing this. I'm throwing myself into podcasting and my social media stuff. And admittedly, there has been elements of it where I've been like, I have needed this. I have needed to have this kind of creative outlet, this networking and everything like that. But I think somewhere along the way, I have kind of lost that balance like a little bit, but I sometimes it kind of takes not having an episode and just being able to kind of sit and talk for a bit to sort of make you realize that, okay, maybe there are a few little improvements I could make in my own personal life to sort of supplement this a little bit better, and I think that kind of comes down to like when you have this like creative momentum, and I would say that I'm riding a really good wave of momentum in my last episode. My last episode being the episode of Wheatus from Brendan B. Brown from Wheatus. That's the biggest interview I've ever done. In 68 now episodes of Behind the Camera with Andy Games, that's the biggest interview I've ever done. I'm getting such incredible feedback from it, and I didn't really want to kind of leave a gap between this and the next episode. I didn't really want to do that. But at the same time, when it comes to doing this, don't just like put up an episode for the sake of it, because then even though you've got an extra number on the board, you are kind of just like, well, am I just filling this gap for the sake of consistency, or does this actually mean something? And now, obviously, I say this, I am putting up a solo episode. So, does this really mean anything? And I would like to think it does. I would like to think it does, because Sunday, I've been doing this for a year and 4 months now, year and 5 months nearly. And most Sundays for that time, I've had an episode to come out. And I kind of feel like if I just sat down for 15, 20 minutes to explain why there's no guest this week, and sort of a bit of the realities of what goes into hosting your own podcast, and sort of just a bit of reflection, we'll say. A little bit of reflection. I would like to think that anybody listen to this, if there's at least one person listening to this who has maybe taken something from this, then, please leave a comment. Tell me about it. Let's network. Let's talk about it. Hopefully it's not just been a lot of time of me rambling on. But sometimes you do need to sort of like pause, sort of have a little think and a look back and think, wow, like this has been amazing. And I think everybody's entitled to a break. Everybody's entitled to a break. So yeah, I kind of think that we're on like a good bit of momentum at the moment. After the Wheatus episode, I still am on cloud 9. It's so weird, because I genuinely don't really get nervous about these episodes anymore. Like, I was more nervous recording this than I was actually speaking to somebody who created one of the most famous songs to ever come out of the 2000s. Like, you would have thought I was very nervous, but strangely not. But like, the thing about it is, it's like, when you're talking to sort of guests who you kind of feel like once upon a time would have been unattainable, well, they're just people like you or me, And another funny thing about that is, people ask me from time to time, how did you get that guest? And honestly, the answer is so simple. You just ask. Like, you literally just send an email, hope they see it, hope they reply, and there you go. If you can find a time that works around your guest, yeah, go for it. It's just, there is an element of luck to it, but ultimately, if I had never reached out and asked, I never would have had that episode. I never would have had Punk Rock Factory. I never would have had Frank Turner. I never would have had Grant Kirkhope. And I never would have had any of the other amazing guests that I've had on the show over the last year and 5 months, had I not just asked. And it doesn't matter how high profile, if you want to call it that, your guests are, just ask. And it actually is at the point now where that's like my favorite question to be asked as a podcaster, is how do you get these guests? Well, you will be shocked. So I think I'll round off this impromptu solo episode with just a little bit of a teaser as to what's coming next for Behind the Camera. So we are coming to the end of 2025, and where this year has gone is just beyond me. It just seems to have gone in like a flash. But I've been looking ahead to 2026 for little different things that we can do with the podcast, like expansions, new series, and there is a few things that I can sort of briefly divulge on without getting too specific. But I have 2 brand new series coming up. 2 brand new series coming up in the new year. One of which will be very different. It will take on a very, very different format. And I am very excited. I already have the first guest lined up for this series. And I will give more details about it whenever I can. But it's going to be launching in early 2026. And I think that's going to be a monthly series, a once a month series. I will, like, as I say, I will keep you up to date with that. We have another series which is going onto a new platform, which is another thing. So that's a wee two for that one. So we're launching a new platform where this other series is going to go. And also behind the camera quick cuts, which some of you may be familiar with, some of you won't if you're not familiar. Behind the camera quick cuts is a side series that I do where I kind of keep to the true spirit of Behind the Camera with Andy Games. I started this podcast interviewing streamers, and then once I kind of branched out to other creatives, I wanted to sort of still kind of pay homage, tribute to the original format, and I created this side series where I kind of just focus on the streamers. So that way I can still have streamers on the show. It's just going to be a side project, and that's like all live on TikTok, and it gets uploaded to YouTube as an exclusive. So season 2 will be starting in March, and season 3 will be in September. So nice little 6-month gap between. I'm very excited for that. I also have a couple of guests lined up for that. I know that's ages away, but again, with these things, you're better to be prepared. You're better to be prepared. So as for the end of 2025, I know we've kind of had no guests this week, but we do have guests lined up for every week till the end of the year and even further on. And there are some incredible, incredible stories to hear. I can't wait to share them with you guys. And yeah, all I'll say is stay tuned. There is a lot of exciting things coming, but for anybody who has made it this far, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sticking around. Thank you so much for being interested in a solo episode, because that's one of the things that concerns me massively, is that are people going to really want to hear what I have to say? Because I am just the face of the podcast. I just ask the questions. But to sort of do things a little bit differently, out of my comfort zone. But I like doing things differently. I always have. Can I promise more solo episodes in the future? Probably not. I'm just going to be honest. Probably not. This was at best a contingency. But like I say, if you've made it this far, I appreciate you for doing so. I appreciate you for listening. I appreciate you for believing in me. That's like the main thing, and I appreciate every single person who has ever tuned into Behind the Camera, because it just means a lot. It just really means a lot, especially when I look back when I started compared to how far I've come now. It honestly means the world. So I will leave you with this. Thank you for tuning in. We have plenty to look forward to in the future, and we will return next week with a guest this time. So thank you for tuning in. And there you have it. That brings us to the end of episode 68 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games. This week's thanks goes out to you, the listeners. Honestly, without you, this podcast wouldn't be what it is today. I know this week's format is a little bit different, but I really appreciate you sticking with me and continuing to support Behind the Camera. Once again, if you'd like to stay connected and support the podcast, drop a follow, check out my Linktree for socials and more, and share the episode with a friend who you think would get a lot out of it. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.